They definitely played on the title well to deliver on the girls, the robots in their bikinis.
Well, this is probably a good place to mention the bikinis and the girls, I suppose. And also their influence on spy cinema, potentially, in the future. Because a lot of people, and we've learnt this, Cam and I, through doing these films, and the Flints particularly were a good example of this. We thought that the Austin Powers films really were just riffing off of the Bonds. But they're really not. There's bits of that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of Flint, and there's apparently quite a bit of Dr. Goldfoot.
For sure.
Yes.
This is the fembot.
Yes. Think about it. If you're making Austin Powers, if you go to a film like this that most people probably haven't seen, people are less likely to get your connection. You don't have to hide it, but it's not going to be like the first time somebody watches Austin Powers, they go like, oh my God, that's obviously Dr. Goldfoot. Most people saw Austin Powers and said, oh, wow, they're riffing on Bond. So, to me, it's like, yeah, if you're going to steal from something, yeah, maybe go for something a little more obscure to get some of your ideas and fuel some of that comedy.
And also some of the concepts felt original to people who were seeing Austin Powers, like, oh my God, what a wacky, crazy concept. Whereas it's like, well, in the 60s, this was normal. But what I really love about this movie is something you just talked about. I want to kind of jump off of where you are, which is like just the creation of this world on a shoestring budget. Because like I've seen a lot of very expensive movies and TV shows the last, 5-10 years that are shot in hallways, office rooms, things like that. Like they feel very uncreative and a lot of just like, okay, this is very visually flat. This is a movie that really didn't have that much money. And yet it's like every frame they're trying to inject something, even like the office building, where Sick operates out of.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the budget on that office? It's not much, but they're finding ways to make it look crammed and kind of weird. And every time it shows up, it's very visually memorable. You look at the like opening where you have that like fast motion shot going down the winding Lombard Street in San Francisco and a lot of travelogue shots of San Francisco. They all look beautiful. And then they recycle a lot of that stuff in the chase at the end. It's like ways to save money, but it looks really beautiful, and so that's the sort of thing that nowadays I watch a lot of films and I'm like, this looks, comparatively quite cheap in comparison to when I watch even a low budget movie in the 1960s.
Well, it's interesting because you actually went to San Francisco a few years back without me, Cam. I was supposed to come on that holiday, but I think you've been on that street.
I ran up it, yes.
How was it?
I mean, it was like as presented in the movie. It hasn't changed that much. When they were doing some of the travelogue shots, other things have changed, a bit. Some of the trolley cars look a little different now, but it's great seeing Lombard Street. It's a very beautiful location to visit if you are in the neighborhood.
But just to go off your point, Cam, I think it's a success, absolutely. And you look at like the dungeon and the lair of Dr. Goldfoot and his estate.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called in the film, but just like the Bikini Machine itself. Let's be honest, it's cardboard with some aluminium foil over the top. That's all it is. But it looks good, and they've got the whole like dolly wheeling the girls out. It just looks like a world. Okay, it doesn't look like it was done on today's budget, but people go back and watch Batman from the 60s. They go back and watch Star Trek from the 60s, and they just love the story. They don't really get fussed about the set. And I think this film actually has a good set, but it doesn't have a good story, not at all. But it's nice to see a little bit of production value, even if they are really on that shoestring budget.
And you look now at how they are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to evoke those cardboard sets on things. Like, the new Star Trek show, Strange New Worlds, is trying to evoke that 1960s Enterprise, which was not, a big, crazy, elaborate, expensive-looking set. So there's something about what they were able to achieve on these budgets back in the 1960s that I just find really impressive. And a movie like this, it can wear out its welcome, because it's kind of set to the frantic setting a lot. At a certain point you go, okay, this is getting a little tiring, but I never get bored of watching just the visual imagination as the movie goes through. It's doing its best to keep me engaged just by giving you, good art direction and set direction.